So again, hopefully we'll be discussing, or I'll attempt to discuss within the following three contexts, the Abrahamic tradition and its impact on Islam, the Abrahamic tradition and its role in Islam, and then Islam as a component of the Abrahamic tradition. Obviously, we start with Abraham himself. The PBUH is peace be upon him. It's not a very specialized peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Abraham, or as we refer to him as Ibrahim, is the father of the great current monotheistic traditions of the world. The intriguing thing is, as Muslims, there's an essential concept that history has always been God emphasizing the responsibility of humanity to worship him and take care of each other. Thus, monotheism starts with Adam. It's not that Abraham started monotheism, but that as time evolved and mankind increased and new ideas come about, various permutations and or, depending on your position, perversions occur, and thus God brings prophets and enlightened individuals to help re-guide people to that central message as initiated by the father of all mankind, Adam. However, in its current majesty, Abraham gains particular significance because God finds in Abraham something special, something significant, for which, if you see in the last sentence, I say, Ibrahim is known as Khalilullah, friend of God. And that's a very powerful statement. Imagine God declares you his friend. That actually lends you a certain significance, obviously, but the emphasis here then is that when God has now declared you his friend, that relationship is to extend not only from Abraham, but then through his children and beyond, and that the family of Abraham, and thus the traditions that Abraham sets forth, becomes how mankind can maintain their connection to God, Allah, and then therefore how we all maintain our friendship to God. And so it's a very important relationship. And thus, again, Abraham is called the father of the modern monotheistic traditions. His life is of great importance to Muslims. Many people don't realize, he's mentioned 69 times in the Quran. Thus, Muhammad, and we'll go over how these various prophets are mentioned in the Quran, he's mentioned 69 times. His story is of great significance. Thus, Muslims are very early on familiar with Abraham's debate with King Nimrod and his disagreement with his father, Azir. Okay, so the story of when Abraham's father built all these idols, and then they went off, and Abraham was offended by the sight of these idols, and he smashed up all the idols with the hammer, and then he left the hammer in the biggest, largest idol that his father made. And so when the people returned to find all these destroyed idols, and Abraham's kind of sitting there, for lack of a better term, hanging out, chilling, okay? People came to him and asked him, what happened? He goes, why are you asking me? Look at that statue over there. He has the hammer, and you see all these things are broken apart. He challenged, and the message here is that God is not just simply by faith alone do we get close to him, but we have to use our intellect, we have to use our reasoning. And thus this story is of great significance that is taught to children at a very early age in the Islamic tradition, that it's not enough simply to just say that you believe, but you have to reason and you have to engage your intellect to believe. That Abraham, as a young child, even challenged his own father with his beliefs. Of course, as a teenager growing up, we try to take the story of Abraham and apply it to all our disagreements with our fathers. It doesn't always work that way. Again, Abraham's debate with King Nimrod is another significance that it's not enough it's not to disrespect authority and stand against authority, but in the great tradition of all our judges, that it's not just enough to say this is the law and this is how it's going to be. That it takes judiciousness, it takes the judicial attitude, the intellect and the reasoning. Very, very often as described and defined by our current constitutional traditions. We often fail. We always talk about the presidency and the legislature. We fail to realize the greatness of our Supreme Court and our judiciary. It is a very powerful tool that has maintained the greatness of this country. And it's in that tradition of reasoning and intellect in which they engage and debate and question the kings for their edicts and their laws, or in our tradition, as we debate and engage our presidents and our Congress for the laws that it passes. The judiciary holds significant weight, and thus Abraham's debate with King Nimrod and engaging him in his discussion also then tells us the importance of being judicious and intellectual in our approach. Thus the Abrahamic tradition now is telling you that it's not just simply mere acceptance, that faith has to be bound by intellect and by reasoning, so that you can come to a greater understanding, a greater awareness of that ultimate truth. And obviously in the tradition of faith, the ultimate truth is the realization of God and the glory of God. Abraham's sacrifice, and I do agree with Professor Burstein that is that there is debate over is it Isaac or is it Ishmael. And so that even in the early scholars, my leanings are more toward Ishmael, just from a historical context and sequence. But that Abraham's sacrifice is commemorated annually by Muslims in a holiday called Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice. And it's kind of intriguing that it's called the festival or the holiday of sacrifice, because sacrifice kind of denotes something negative. You know, you had to give up something. But in that message that God delivers to us, it's not always an issue. It's not always an issue of what you're giving up, but what you gained by that sacrifice. And thus the message, as seen by Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son, and ultimately God's mercy toward Abraham's son, regardless of which son it is, because it's not the son that was to be sacrificed, it's the act that Abraham engaged in. And the willingness of either son to obey Abraham was that God replaced it with a sheep and then set forth a new agenda for Abraham to go out and serve the world. In that for us, we annually, if you can or can afford to, slaughter a sheep, and that very meat is not used by the family, but actually given to the poor and the impoverished, where meat is very difficult to come by or obtain. Abraham and Ishmael rebuild the Kaaba in Mecca, and I'll kind of go over into that story a little bit later. But thus you can see that Abraham's life, his willingness to sacrifice his son, his building of the Kaaba in Mecca, and his designation as Khalilullah, all have a significant and profound impact on Islam as a faith, also Islam as a faith of theological thinking or scholarly thinking. And thus the Abrahamic tradition has a very important and vital role to maintain that which makes Islam unique. The fifth pillar of Islam, the Hajj, is also an essential manifestation of the form of worship that Abraham engaged in when he went to the desert of Paran, which can translate into the Arabic word Bakka, and Bakka is actually the area of now Mecca. The steps of the pilgrimage follow Hagar, Abraham, and Ishmael's experiences. The Safa and Marwa, where Muslims run between two little hills, symbolizing the desperation of Hagar as she's trying to find water for her child, and whereupon the angel comes down and descends to tell Hagar that there's a spring that's at the feet of Ishmael. Do not worry. Is also part of that pilgrimage. The foot impressions of Abraham are still preserved in that area. Now, whether they're actually his feet or whether that becomes a matter of debate, archaeological debate. But those impressions are there, and Muslims go around to worship. Again, the footsteps. Now, again, walking in the shoes of someone else. The importance, walk a mile in his shoes. There's this kind of emphasis of that tradition that's in the Hajj, in the annual pilgrimage, which actually is going to be happening in about 2 to 3 weeks, where millions of Muslims gather to follow in those footsteps. The black stone, which is believed to be a stone brought down to heaven to Abraham and Ishmael, which was for a while a cornerstone of the Kaaba, the structure that's in the center of the mosque in Mecca. Again, was a place, as a gift of God, rewarding Abraham and Ishmael to, in a way, decorate the Kaaba as it's just been built. Again, signifying Abraham and Ishmael's relationship with God, but also then another step for Muslims to follow in the footsteps, because touching the black stone, although not a requirement in the faith, tends to be something that Muslims are drawn to, just to kind of get closer to that friend of God. Al-Jamarat, in which the devil tempts Abraham. There's a portion of the Hajj, or the pilgrimage, again, where we throw stones. I actually performed the Hajj. It's a very spiritual and enlightening experience. Again, another part of the footsteps of Abraham. The Jamarat are 3 places where the devil tried to tempt Abraham. This is depending on the story. But as Abraham walked away from Hagar and Ishmael, because God told him, just leave them there and I will take care of them. And the devil's trying to tempt Abraham to question his faith and the authority of God. And Abraham putting his firm faith and belief and trust and his reasoning that God will take care of his own.